In this week's drive, we add another famous name to the entry list for the Dakar Rally. Join this world champion on a wild ride to nowhere. Wonder if this NASCAR driver knows he has a problem. And watch the Superbike King on his quest to keep his crown. All this and more in this week's Drive. In probably the worst kept secret of the racing year, BMW have confirmed that they're buying the Sauber Formula One team and have pledged to increase the number of employees at the Swiss factory, which has one of Formula One's most advanced wind tunnels. BMW held a news conference in Munich to confirm the rumours that they'll take over Peter Sauber's Formula One squad. BMW have been engine partner with a privately owned Williams team since 2000, winning just 10 races in that period. Their partnership was supposed to run until 2009, but has descended into acrimony in recent months with a lack of results.
The partnership with BMW is an ideal solution for Sauber. And when I say Sauber, I don't just mean the team, but also for myself personally. I was asked time and again, especially by journalists, how the succession would be dealt with. And it's a very difficult task to fulfill something like that in Formula One, as you all know. This problem, and it was a problem for me, is now being solved ideally this way.
BMW has a history of providing engines to teams. It ran its turbocharged engines in Brabhams during the 1980s and won the World Championship with Nelson Piquet in 1983, and then left Formula One until returning to run with Williams in 2000. Here, Piquet is seen practicing at Kyalami before the first round of 1984. BMW has recently been voicing dissatisfaction with Williams and its strategy. Talks on engine supply and other matters are expected to continue with Williams next week, even if the move was not unexpected after a clear deterioration in relations with the Munich-based carmaker. Team boss Sir Frank Williams now has two obvious options, and neither involve an exclusive manufacturer deal: buy the BMW engine or go elsewhere.
Of course, Frank Williams was kept informed all throughout our talks. And naturally, I immediately informed him this morning. Our negotiations only ended at 3 a.m. this morning. This means we really kept Frank Williams informed all throughout.
BMW's decision to run their own team shifts the Formula One landscape, strengthening the hand of car makers in their battle for control of the sport and sending the message that BMW at least intend to be around long term.
BMW has demonstrated that we can build the most powerful Formula One engine, but now apparently it's a much more complex task. We know that we will not be successful right from the start, but we have a very good and sound basis in the Swiss team, and we have a clear program how to proceed. I'm very sure we are on the right path and successes will come.
And what does the deal mean to Peter Sauber?
It has become very difficult for a small independent to maintain its position in Formula One. The proximity to a car manufacturer has become more and more important, and I've mentioned this several times in the past. I've underpinned this by saying that I would be happy to sell this company if my objectives were to be achieved. Those two objectives are my continued involvement in the sport and the continuation of the company in Hillville in Switzerland.
Meanwhile, furious American racing fans lined up outside the Indianapolis Motor Speedway demanding refunds for the farcical US Grand Prix, which was allowed to run with only 6 cars. 7 teams, including championship leaders Renault and McLaren, decided not to race after Michelin expressed concerns that its tyres could not handle the Indy track.
I want to know if there's going to be a race next year. I want to know if we're going to get our money back for this year.
It's Indianapolis Speedway that's not responsible for it because they are just the racetrack.
I thought it was an extreme disappointment. I've gone to approximately 35 Indy 500s. I've been to numerous Brickyards. I've been to Formula One races basically from the inception. And yesterday I left the place for the first time, probably as disappointed, as upset as I've ever been.
Miller has filed a class action lawsuit for a refund for his tickets to the race.
So why did you file a lawsuit?
Well, first of all, I think any kind of issues involving the legalities of the case need to be referred to the attorneys. You know, there was a class action lawsuit that was filed both in federal court and in state court, and any terms of the specifics of the case, I would refer to our attorney, Mr. Bach.
Michelin has already offered complete refunds to every ticket holder, but other fans might want more than that, including airfares.
Well, I think possibly once they get news of that it's taken place, and because I noticed there were a tremendous number of people that showed great dissatisfaction at the race yesterday, both in terms of booing and gestures that were made, actual soft things being thrown on the track. Just in the area where I was in Standee, the traditional turn one at the Speedway, just a tremendous displeasure what people had seen from both people obviously from the local area and from out of town or from overseas. They just seemed completely bewildered and just befuddled what had transpired on the track. In fact, behind me, I even noticed some disruption that occurred, and they had to actually bring out some police to kind of quell some activity that was happening by the Speedway office. So many people are upset by what was transpiring.
F1 is struggling for acceptance, and this won't help. Carlos Sainz, World Rally Champion in 1990 and 92, will compete in the Dakar Rally for Volkswagen. Sainz, the most successful rally driver, came out of retirement to drive in the World Rallies in Turkey, where he finished 4th, and Greece, where he finished 3rd for Citroën. He temporarily replaced Francois Duval of Belgium, but has now turned his back on World Rallies to compete in rally raid events, such as the Faroan Rally in Egypt and the Dakar Rally. Sainz will be competing in the 2006 Dakar in January with Andreas Schulz as his co-driver. Schulz has won the Dakar twice before for Mitsubishi, once in 2001 with Germany's Jutta Kleinschmidt and in 2003 with Hiroshi Matsuoka of Japan.
Carlos will contribute a lot to this team in respect of technical and driving skills. Andreas Schulz in terms of navigation. We already had a strong crew and it has just become stronger.
The pair will test their new machine in Tunisia and then tackle the Faroan Rally in Egypt's desert in September. The most successful WRC driver with 2 world titles and 26 wins, Sainz believes that at 43 he's not too old to learn new tricks.
Well, on the switch from World Rally Championship to rally raids, I always thought that when I stopped competing in the World Rally Championship, the Dakar Rally would mean a great challenge. That was my ambition, my goal. And now I am ready to master the race in one of the world's best teams. Ready to learn and prepare for this kind of race.
And Schulz is looking forward to taking on his old team of Mitsubishi in the grueling marathon rally.
My basic goal is to aim for victory. I have always been among the top 5, and I don't think it will be a problem to reach the same level with Carlos. I'm certain we can achieve that with the race Touareg. The main challenger is Mitsubishi, as everyone knows, and we will be able to keep up with them.
Chris Nissen announced that there will be 4 and possibly 5 Touaregs competing in the 2006 Dakar, which will visit Morocco, Mauritania, Mali and Guinea. Besides Sainz and Schulz, there are cars for Jutta Kleinschmidt and Fabrizia Pons, Bruno Sabi and Michel Perrin, and Camille de Villiers and Tina Turner. Another is planned for NASCAR driver Robbie Gordon and Dirk van Zitzewitz, who won the first stage of the Dakar Rally this year. Danish Audi driver Tom Christensen started from a maiden pole position for the 5th round of the DTM German touring cars. He shared the front row with German teammate Martin Tomczyk, but Christensen had a terrible start and British driver Jamie Green moved from 4th to 1st place in his Mercedes. The situation went from bad to worse for Audi on lap 2 when Gary Paffett passed Tomczyk for 2nd place. 6 laps later, Laurent Aiello lost his 4th place thanks to some clever overtaking from Sweden's reigning champion Matthias Ekström in his Audi. On lap 7, Mika Hakkinen pitted with a left rear wheel problem, and 2 laps later the Finn was off the track and out of the race. At the the front, however, it was Paffett and Green, the two British Mercedes drivers who were fighting it out for the top spot. On lap 10, the pair pitted and their race resumed as soon as the tyres touched the ground. Once double World Formula One champion Mika Häkkinen had caught his breath, he walked home. Ekstrom, however, was slowly making his way up the field. On lap 23, Tomsik allowed him to pass and move up to third place. 8 laps later, Green outbraked himself, and this allowed the Swedish champion to put his Audi up into second place. A lap later, 12 laps from the end, Tomsik joined Häkkinen on the sidelines when suspension damage meant that his race was over as well. Paffett stayed in front to the checkered flag, with Ekstrom in second place and Green third. After 44 laps, the 24-year-old Briton won by 3.1 seconds and reduced Ekstrom's championship lead to just 1 point. Jamie Green, last year's European Formula 3 champion, secured his maiden DTM podium finish, and the other points were scored by Bernd Schneider, Tom Christensen, Alan McNish, Laurent Aiello and Marcel Fassler. The crowd of 88,000 was the biggest ever at a motorsport event at Oschersleben. On to the Indy Racing League, where fast lady Danica Patrick has been in the news lately, having led the Indy 500. This time she started near the rear of the field, was not a factor in the race and finished 10th. Just 39 laps into the race, former IRL champion Scott Dixon of New Zealand tangled with Dario Franchitti. Dixon later admitted the crash was his fault, and Franchitti was able to rejoin the race and finished second. Later in the race, on lap 165, Sam Hornish's car got loose and all by himself he crashed into both the outside and pit road walls, scattering debris that others were lucky to avoid. Roger Yasukawa was involved in 2 separate incidents. First, he tangled with Scott Sharp, who clearly blamed Yasukawa for the accident. Then, with just 8 laps to go, Darren Manning also crashed with Yasukawa, and he too felt the accident was Yasukawa's fault. But this time, Roger was also pitched into the wall. Helio Castroneves was right behind the incident. He gambled on diving between the sliding cars and was surprised not to hit anything. With that near miss behind him, Castroneves won a sprint to the finish after a restart to claim victory. He won despite a tender bruise in his left shoulder, the product of a crash during a test session 8 days earlier. And moments after the win, before he drove to victory lane, before he celebrated with his crew, Castroneves, as he has often done after previous race wins, especially the Indy 500, clambered the fence to share the victory with spectators. This post-victory tradition has earned him the name Spider-Man. He won by just over half a second from Dario Franchitti. Patrick Carpentier, in his first year in IRL after moving across from the Champ Car Series, finished third. The grandstands were full at the Michigan International Speedway for the start of the Batman Begins 400-mile race southwest of Detroit. The field got away cleanly, and for the most part the race was incident-free. On the 42nd lap, Brian Vickers spun and crashed as leading cars entered the pit lane. Vickers hit the tyre barrier, but got his car started and drove into the garage area for repairs. He returned to the race on lap 85, but was 42 laps down at that point. He finished 41st, the last official finisher. On lap 168, with just 32 laps left in the race, Sterling Marlin was in deep trouble with flames under his car from an oil leak. This created just the 4th caution period of the day. Following drivers had to guess where the blazing car was headed and where the trail of oil was. Scott Biffle was running second to Tony Stewart, but decided to stay out on the track during the resulting caution period as Stewart and several other lead lap cars pitted for fresh tyres. Biffle and the rest of the leaders had pitted about a dozen laps earlier. It was a good decision. Biffle only led for about 63 of the 200 laps, but was at the front when it mattered most. He took the checkered flag for the 5th victory of the season, more than any other driver this year. But he remains second in the drivers' standings, 49 points behind Jimmy Johnson, who could only manage 19th on the day. The Misano circuit on Italy's Adriatic coast was bathed in bright sunshine for round 6 of the 12-event Superbike World Championship. At the start of race 1, Chris Vermeulen was leading fellow Australian Troy Corser and Frenchman Reggie Laconi. Trackside, the temperatures were soaring to 33 degrees and even hotter for some riders. The heat, coupled with debris on the track from the crash, caused race 1 to be red flagged, triggering a restart. The Santa Monica track in Misano is overlooked by just one building, a convent, and some of the resident nuns love motorsport and pack the windows to watch. From the restart, Vermeulen led into the first corner. He was followed by another Australian, fellow Honda rider Karl Muggeridge, Laconi's Ducati and former world champion Corser on his Suzuki. Germany's young hopeful Max Neukirchner, who prompted the red flag after sliding into the gravel, went off again after the resumption and slipped back to 12th in the riders' standings after ending the day without scoring a point. Luckily, the race didn't need to be restarted, and the two Australians on their Hondas held off Laconi's Ducati, with fellow Aussie Corser and his Suzuki teammate Yukio Kageyama close behind. Reggie was having the ride of his life. Starting from third on the grid, the Ducati rider moved past Vermeulen to lead race 1. Kageyama created some work for his mechanics by comprehensively bending his bike against the Misano scenery. His chances of a first world title are looking non-existent. Reigning world champ James Toseland was able to carry the battle for third place to Corser and eventually pushed his Ducati ahead of the Suzuki, much to the delight of the partisan Italian crowd. Laconi kept it on the road to win race 1 from Vermeulen by the comfortable margin of 4.4 seconds. Toseland crossed the line ahead of Corser, but the red flag delay meant that the positions were decided by aggregate time and their places were swapped. Race 2 saw pole sitter Corser make it into the first corner ahead of Vermeulen and Muggeridge, with Laconi in 4th place. Vermeulen quickly reeled in his countryman to take the lead. Moments later, Laconi forced his Ducati past 2, pushing the ex-Foggy Petronas, ex-Ducati rider Corser back to 3rd. But by the time 8 of the 25 laps of the 4-kilometre track had been completed, Laconi was in front once again. Vermeulen and Corser were left in the Frenchman's wake as Laconi slipped away once again to cross the line in 40 minutes and 46 seconds, with Vermeulen 1.5 seconds back and Corser another 1.6 seconds behind him. Corser, who won 5 of the opening 6 races of the season, had to be content with 3rd place. Riding a 4-cylinder bike for the first time, the former world champion maintains a 73-point lead at the top of the championship log with 254 points. Laconi has revived his hopes of the championship with a maximum haul of 50 title points to lift him up to 3rd in the standings, 19 points behind Vermeulen on 162, after 6 of the season's 12 rounds. At this stage, Toseland's hopes of defending his world title are looking unlikely. Round 7 of the Superbike World Championship takes place at Brno in the Czech Republic. Assen in the Netherlands staged the 7th round of the MotoGP season. Defending champion and standings leader Valentino Rossi started from pole position, but a poor start allowed his fellow Italian Marco Melandri to grab the lead. Rossi fell back to 6th place, but the Yamaha rider battled his way through the pack. Loris Caparossi's Ducati was passed on lap 2 as Rossi moved into 4th place, and the Italian then had Honda riders Sete Gibernau, Nicky Hayden and Melandri in his sights. Gibernau's efforts to hold off Rossi came to an end on lap 8 of 19, with the Doctor passing his Spanish arch-rival on the inside line. It would take Rossi another 2 laps to catch compatriot Melandri, and once the movie star Honda rider had been dispatched, it seemed that Rossi could almost cruise to the line. However, former 250cc world champion Melandri closed up on the championship leader in the final laps, and Rossi had to make one last effort to hold his lead. Rossi claimed his 6th win of the season and became the first Yamaha rider to win 5 Premier Class races in succession. Melandri took 2nd place, his best result since joining MotoGP in 2003. Rossi's Yamaha teammate Colin Edwards finished 3rd.
when I was behind the three Hondas, I know I'm able to go a little bit faster, so I try. I overtake Aiden, Gibernau, and after Marco, and I go. I make some good lap, and I take a little bit of advantage, and I say maybe it's okay, but Melandri today was very strong, and he come back. So on the last 3 or 4 laps, I need only to concentrate on the track and try to make all perfect, and we are able to win another time.
Multiple world champion Giacomo Agostini won 20 consecutive races, but Rossi, who won 7 consecutives for Honda, is the only rider on the list of consecutive winners using bikes from 2 different manufacturers. Sebastian Porto sealed his 2nd successive Dutch GP victory in the 250cc class. The Argentine held on to first place in the latter stages with championship leader Daniel Pedrosa and Jorge Lorenzo in close attention. Porto won in a time of 38 minutes, 2.1 seconds, with Spaniard Pedrosa grabbing 2nd place ahead of his compatriot Lorenzo. Pedrosa inched ahead in defence of his title, but Casey Stoner, 6th at Assen, kept alive his slender 2nd place from Andrea Dovizioso, who finished 7th. Hungary's Gabor Talmaxi won the 125cc race, his 2nd Grand Prix win this year. Initially, an 8-rider leading pack formed, and the riders swapped position with no one able to break away. Mika Kallio crashed mid-race, and the last lap saw Simoncelli go out in an incident which also cost time to Luthi, who ran off the track but rejoined to finish 10th. The season continues with the US Grand Prix in California. At the Motocross Grand Prix of France, the 9th round of the World Motocross Championship, multiple world champion Stefan Everts is still the man to watch and catch if you can. The Belgian is on course for yet another world title and was in control for much of the opening moto, but unable to shake off Ben Townley. After leading for 18 of the 21 laps, Everts was overhauled by the New Zealander, who pulled away to win. Easing up, Everts finished 7 seconds adrift. Joshua Coppens, 2nd in the title, was another 10 seconds behind, with Michael Pichon 4th. In the 2nd moto, Townley pulled away into an early lead and stayed there, leading the battle for minor positions to keep the fans entertained. Yoshitaka Atsuta found himself contesting the lead on lap 1, but he was soon fighting to stay among the front runners. Townley's task was made easier when Everts pushed too hard, making a rare mistake and falling off his Yamaha. Everts would eventually finish 7th for a total of just 36 points. Some are saying that he's not the force of old and cracks are appearing in his invincibility. But fellow Belgian former world champion Joel Smets looked on course for a useful points haul from race 2, lurking around about 5th place for much of the time. By lap 8, Coppens was up to 2nd place, and the Kiwi stayed there to claim a satisfying 42 points. On a boiling hot day, Smets was making his presence felt in the worst way. It looks like he cut across fellow Belgian Steve Ramon. Pascal Leroux finished 5th on his way to a 29-point haul for his day's work. Poetic justice perhaps for Smets, as the exhaust fell off his Suzuki, probably as a result of the earlier crash, and on the final lap he stalled. No problems though for an exuberant Townley as he romped home to earn another 25 points. Coppens trailed in 7.4 seconds behind in 2nd, with Pichon 3rd. Townley's total of 304 moves him to within 12 of Coppens in the battle for 2nd place in the overall standings. Despite his poor showing, Everts still remains comfortably clear with 375 points, and he'll be looking for an improvement in the Grand Prix of Sweden. So, whether you're looking forward to a new future, going up for a better view, or just setting still more records, so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.